The metallic blue SUV sat in my driveway like a monument to someone else's generosity. I stood in my garage doorway, coffee mug in hand, watching the morning sun glint off its pristine paint job. A Lexus GX, the kind of vehicle that cost more than most people made in a year. The kind Celeste had been eyeing at the country club for months. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" I called out as my wife emerged from the house, keys dangling from her manicured fingers. Celeste turned, her smile bright and practiced. "Oh, Martin, I was hoping to catch you before you started working." She gestured toward the SUV with the enthusiasm of a game show hostess. "What do you think?" I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch. 20 years of marriage had taught me the value of patience. "Nice car, honey. Planning on driving it to Wall Street?" Her laugh tinkled like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, artificial and carefully tuned. "It's for work, actually. Bradford says image is everything in the startup world. Clients need to see success before they'll invest in it." Bradford Kane. The name had been appearing in our conversations with increasing frequency over the past 3 months. Her mentor in the entrepreneurial world, she called him. A venture capitalist with more money than sense and a reputation for helping promising young businesswomen get their start. "Bradford believes in me, Martin. He says I have the vision to make something really special happen." I nodded thoughtfully, running my fingers along the SUV's spotless chrome bumper. "Must be quite the believer to put this kind of money behind your vision. What's the interest rate on a loan like this?" "Oh, it's not a loan." Celeste's voice carried that particular note of condescension she reserved for explaining things she thought were beyond my understanding. "It's an investment in the business. Everything has to look professional. The office space, the equipment, the transportation. Bradford understands that success requires the right foundation." The right foundation. I almost choked on my coffee. In my 23 years running Ashford Classic restorations, I'd built my foundation with calloused hands, 16-hour days, and a reputation for honest work. But apparently, in Celeste's world, foundations came with leather seats and heated steering wheels. "Well," I said, stepping back to admire the vehicle's lines, "it certainly makes a statement." "I knew you'd understand." She kissed my cheek, leaving the faint scent of expensive perfume. "I have a meeting with Bradford this morning to discuss the next phase of development. Don't wait up. These strategy sessions can run quite late." I watched her climb into the SUV, adjusting the mirrors and seat with the familiarity of someone who'd already spent considerable time behind the wheel. The engine purred to life with the quiet confidence that only German engineering could provide. As she backed out of the driveway, I caught a glimpse of something hanging from the rearview mirror, a small charm I didn't recognize. Heart-shaped, catching the light as she turned onto the street. Derek Hoffman, my lead mechanic and the closest thing I had to a best friend, emerged from the garage, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. "That's some ride the missus is sporting. Business must be booming." Apparently so. I drained my coffee mug and headed toward the 1967 Mustang we'd been restoring for the past 3 months. Though I'm still trying to figure out exactly what business she's in. Derek's laugh was rough around the edges, like everything else about him. Sugar daddy business, sounds like. This Bradford character providing more than just transportation? I picked up a polishing cloth and began working on the Mustang's chrome. The repetitive motion helped me think, and I had plenty to think about. Celeste's startup had been consuming more and more of her time lately. Late meetings, weekend conferences, networking events that seemed to happen with suspicious regularity. "Derek, you ever install a GPS tracker in a vehicle?" He paused in his work on a carburetor rebuild. "Sure, plenty of times. Insurance companies love them for theft recovery. Classic cars especially." He glanced toward the street where Celeste's SUV had disappeared. "You thinking about protecting your investment?" "Something like that." The morning passed quietly, filled with the familiar rhythm of restoration work. There's something honest about bringing a classic car back to life, stripping away the rust and neglect, rebuilding what time has damaged, making something beautiful function the way it was meant to. It's the opposite of whatever game Celeste seemed to be playing with her new mentor. Around noon, my phone buzzed with a text message from my wife. "Meeting running long, don't worry about lunch. Bradford's treating the whole team to that new place downtown." The whole team. I'd been hearing about this mysterious team for weeks, but Celeste remained vague about exactly who they were or what they did. Her startup existed in a realm of buzzwords and business jargon that somehow never translated into concrete details. I was elbow deep in the Mustang's engine compartment when my phone rang. Celeste's name appeared on the screen, but when I answered, I heard only muffled voices and the sound of clinking glasses. A pocket dial, or as Derek called them, a butt dial. I was about to hang up when I heard my wife's laugh, followed by a man's voice I recognized as Bradford Kane's. "You spoil me, Bradford, but you know I appreciate everything you do for me. Business is about relationships, Celeste, and our relationship has been very productive." I found myself holding my breath, pressing the phone closer to my ear. "If you want those late-night strategy sessions to continue, you know how to keep me motivated." Celeste's voice carried a playful tone I hadn't heard in months. After all, Bradford Kane's support means everything to my success. I do enjoy supporting ambitious women, especially ones who understand that success requires flexibility. Bradford Kane's investment strategy is so much more sophisticated than anything I've seen before. Bradford Kane's approach to mentoring really sets him apart from other venture capitalists. When Bradford Kane believes in someone, he goes all in. The conversation continued for another 20 seconds, Bradford's name woven through every sentence like a thread binding them together. They discussed performance bonuses and after-hours consultations in terms that would have made a corporate lawyer blush. The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my phone in the sudden quiet of the garage. Derek looked up from his work. "Everything all right, boss?" I saved the voicemail to 3 different locations on my phone, then forwarded a copy to my email account. "Derek, how do you feel about having dinner with the Harmon family?" "Celeste's parents? Those two make me nervous just thinking about them." "Perfect. I think it's time we had a little celebration. Celeste's startup deserves recognition, don't you think?" That evening, I called Judith Harmon, Celeste's mother, and the unofficial queen of our town's social hierarchy. Judith had never particularly liked me. I wasn't successful enough, refined enough, or wealthy enough for her precious daughter. But she had a weakness for family gatherings, especially ones that might showcase Celeste's achievements. "Martin, how lovely to hear from you. Celeste tells me her business venture is going wonderfully." "That's actually why I'm calling, Judith. I thought we should have a proper celebration, family dinner, just the 4 of us. Celeste has been working so hard, and I know she'd love to share her success with you and Theodore." The invitation was accepted with enthusiasm. Judith loved nothing more than an opportunity to hear about her daughter's triumphs, and Theodore, despite his generally cold demeanor, took pride in Celeste's entrepreneurial spirit. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing, not just the meal, Celeste's favorite pot roast with all the traditional sides, but also the technical aspects of the evening's entertainment, a portable Bluetooth speaker, strategically placed near the dining room table, my phone, fully charged and ready. When Celeste arrived home that evening, she was practically glowing with excitement about the family dinner. "Martin, this is so thoughtful. Mother will be thrilled to hear about all the progress we're making. Bradford says we're ahead of schedule on every metric." "I'm sure he does." I smiled, seasoning the roast with perhaps a bit more enthusiasm than necessary. "I can't wait to hear all about it." The Harmon family arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, because Theodore Harmon had never been late for anything in his 72 years of life. Judith swept into our home like a queen making a royal visit, her silver hair perfectly styled and her designer handbag clutched with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. "Martin, dear, something smells wonderful." Her tone suggested mild surprise that I was capable of producing anything worthwhile. "And Celeste, darling, you look radiant. Success agrees with you." Theodore nodded curtly in my direction before settling into his usual chair at our dining room table. He was a man who communicated primarily through facial expressions and strategic silences, letting Judith handle the bulk of conversation while he observed and judged. Celeste had changed into her favorite dress, the black one that made her feel powerful and sophisticated. She'd spent 20 minutes on her makeup and another 10 arranging the fresh flowers I'd bought for the table. Everything had to be perfect for her parents, especially when she had good news to share. "Mother, you're going to be so proud of what we've accomplished. Bradford says our business model is revolutionary. He's never seen a startup with this much potential." "Bradford Kane, you mean?" Judith's eyes lit up with recognition. "I've heard wonderful things about him at the country club. Very successful man, very selective about his investments." I served the pot roast with careful attention to presentation, making sure everyone had their preferred portions before taking my own seat. The dining room felt warm and intimate, candlelight reflecting off the good china we only used for special occasions. "Before we eat," I announced, reaching for my phone, "I thought you might enjoy hearing Celeste's own thoughts about her business partnership. She's so articulate when she talks about her work." Celeste looked puzzled. "Martin, what are you—" "I got a message from you today, honey. Thought your parents would enjoy hearing your take on entrepreneurship." I connected my phone to the portable speaker with practiced ease. "You sound so professional when you talk about business relationships." The room fell silent as I pressed play. Celeste's voice filled the dining room with crystal clarity. "You spoil me, Bradford, but you know I appreciate everything you do for me." Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. Bradford Kane's voice followed. "Business is about relationships, Celeste, and our relationship has been very productive." Judith's face transformed from proud mother to something carved from granite. "If you want those late-night strategy sessions to continue, you know how to keep me motivated. After all, Bradford Kane's support means everything to my success." Theodore set down his wine glass with deliberate precision. "Bradford Kane's investment strategy is so much more sophisticated than anything I've seen before. Bradford Kane's approach to mentoring really sets him apart from other venture capitalists. When Bradford Kane believes in someone, he goes all in." The conversation continued, each mention of Bradford's name landing like a hammer blow. Performance bonuses, after-hours consultations, sophisticated investment strategies that had nothing to do with spreadsheets or business plans. When the recording ended, the silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Celeste's face had drained of all color. Her carefully applied makeup suddenly looked garish against her pale skin. "Martin, I can explain." "Explain what, exactly?" Judith's voice could have frozen champagne. "Explain why you're discussing performance bonuses with a married man? Explain why his name appears in every sentence like some kind of incantation?" "Mother, it's not what it sounds like. Bradford is my business mentor. We heard what you were discussing." Theodore's words carried the weight of final judgment. He stood from the table, his dinner untouched. "Judith, we're leaving." "Daddy, please, just let me—" "There's nothing to explain, Celeste." Judith's purse snapped shut with the finality of a coffin closing. "I've heard quite enough about your startup for one evening." They left without another word, the front door closing behind them with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. Celeste turned on me with fury that made her beautiful face ugly. "How could you do this to me? That was a private conversation." "Private?" I took a sip of wine, savoring its complexity. "Seemed pretty public when you called me in the middle of it." though I suppose you were too busy discussing Bradford Kane's investment philosophy to notice. You don't understand the business world, Martin. Networking requires building personal relationships. Bradford is helping me succeed. Oh, I understand perfectly. I began clearing the table, stacking plates with methodical care. Bradford Kane's helping you succeed. Bradford Kane's investment strategy is sophisticated. Bradford Kane believes in going all in. 11 times, Celeste. You said his name 11 times in 30 seconds. She lunged for my phone, but I'd anticipated the move. Years of working with my hands had kept me quick, and I easily avoided her grasp. Delete that recording, Martin. I mean it. Why? Ashamed of your business acumen? Her phone buzzed with a text message. I caught a glimpse of the sender's name. Tessa. Her best friend, and, according to Celeste, another member of her mysterious startup team. Deny everything. Say it was taken out of context. We can fix this. I held up my phone, showing her the message I'd intercepted. Looks like Tessa's got some damage control strategies of her own. Must be quite the business education you're all getting. Celeste sank into her chair, the fight draining out of her like air from a punctured tire. You've ruined everything. My parents, my reputation, my business. Your business? I laughed, and the sound surprised me with its bitterness. Startups are hard, Celeste. Sometimes they fail. Sometimes they require better business models. She stared at me as if seeing a stranger. I don't know who you are anymore. I'm the same man I've always been. I fix things that are broken. I restore things that have lost their way. But some things... I gestured toward the empty chairs where her parents had been sitting. Some things are beyond repair. After she fled upstairs, I sat alone in the dining room, surrounded by the remnants of our celebration dinner. The candles had burned low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. I poured myself another glass of wine and listened to the recording one more time, memorizing every inflection, every pause, every mention of Bradford Kane's name. Derek had been right about sugar daddies, but he'd underestimated the sweetness of revenge. The next morning brought a text message from Celeste. Gone to Tessa's to think, need space to figure things out. I was fine with space. Space gave me room to work. Murphy's Bar and Grill occupied the corner of Main and Elm like a comfortable old shoe, worn but reliable, familiar to everyone in town. It was the kind of place where news traveled faster than gossip, and gossip traveled at the speed of light. If you wanted to know anything about anyone in our little community, Murphy's was your first stop. I arrived around 11:30, early enough to claim a stool at the bar, but late enough that the morning coffee crowd had been replaced by the lunch regulars. Lila Patterson, Judith Harmon's best friend and the town's unofficial information broker, was holding court at her usual table near the window. "Martin Ashford!" she called out as I settled at the bar. "Haven't seen you here in ages. How's business?" "Can't complain, Lila. Cars keep breaking down. I keep fixing them. Simple economics." "And Celeste? I heard she's become quite the entrepreneur, starting her own company, working with that Kane fellow from the country club." I ordered a beer and a burger, taking my time with the response. "Oh, you know Celeste. Always full of ambition. She's been spending a lot of time learning about business relationships lately. Bradford Kane's quite the mentor, from what I hear. Very hands-on approach to helping young businesswomen." Lila's eyes glittered with the anticipation of fresh gossip. Though I suppose his wife might have opinions about how hands-on he gets. This was news to me. Bradford's married? 23 years come September. Patricia Kane. Lovely woman. Very active in the charity circuit. I'm surprised Celeste hasn't mentioned her. I filed this information away for future use. I'm sure it just hasn't come up. Business partnerships can be complicated enough without mixing in family dynamics. Oh, absolutely. Though from what I hear, Bradford's partnerships with young women tend to be quite intensive. Lots of late-night meetings, weekend retreats, one-on-one strategy sessions. Lila leaned forward conspiratorially. Patricia spends most of her time at their place in the Hamptons these days. Says she prefers the peace and quiet. The burger arrived, giving me time to process this new intelligence. Bradford Kane wasn't just Celeste's sugar daddy. He was a married sugar daddy with a pattern of behavior, which meant my wife wasn't his first protege, and probably wouldn't be his last. Lila, you seem to know quite a bit about Bradford's business practices. Honey, I know about everyone's business practices. That's what happens when you've lived in the same town for 67 years and your late husband owned the insurance agency. People tell me things. What kind of things? She glanced around the bar, making sure we wouldn't be overheard. The kind of things that would make Patricia Kane very interested in her husband's mentoring techniques. The kind of things that might affect his standing at the country club, if you know what I mean. I knew exactly what she meant. 20 minutes later, Tessa Morrison walked into Murphy's like she owned the place. Celeste's best friend since high school, Tessa had always struck me as the type of person who collected secrets the way other people collected stamps. She spotted me immediately and made a beeline for my table. Martin, we need to talk. Tessa, how nice to see you. Join me for lunch? She slid into the booth across from me, her designer handbag clutched like a shield. You know why I'm here. I'm afraid I don't, but I'm always happy to chat with Celeste's friends. How's the startup business treating you? That recording was taken completely out of context. Celeste was discussing legitimate business arrangements with a respected investor. If you're trying to sabotage her success out of jealousy. Jealousy? I laughed loud enough that several other patrons turned to look. Tessa, I'm proud of my wife's entrepreneurial spirit. In fact, I'm so proud that I've been sharing her business insights with everyone who'll listen. Her face went pale. What do you mean? Well, take Bradford Kane's investment philosophy, for instance. Bradford Kane believes in hands-on mentoring. Bradford Kane's approach to business relationships is very personal. Bradford Kane goes all in when he believes in someone. I counted off each repetition on my fingers. 11 times, Tessa. She managed to work his name into the conversation 11 times in 30 seconds. That's some serious branding consistency. You can't use that recording, it's private. Actually, it's not. She called me, remember? Accidentally, sure, but legally speaking, I was an invited participant in the conversation. I leaned forward, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Though I have to say, I'm curious about your role in all this. You're part of the startup team, right? What exactly does that involve? Tessa's composure cracked like thin ice. I help with administrative tasks, scheduling, correspondence, that sort of thing. Scheduling Bradford Kane's late-night strategy sessions? It's not what you think. I think it's exactly what I think. The question is, how many other people are going to think the same thing when they hear about Bradford Kane's mentoring techniques? She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Stay away from Celeste, Martin, and stay away from Bradford. You're playing with people who have more power than you understand. Power? I smiled, raising my beer in a mock toast. Tessa, I'm just a simple mechanic who fixes broken things, but sometimes the most broken things are the ones that look perfect on the surface. After she left, I sat in the comfortable buzz of Murphy's lunch crowd, listening to conversations swirl around me like autumn leaves. Already, I could hear whispers of my wife's name mixed with Bradford Kane's. The gossip machine was warming up, and soon it would be running at full speed. Lila appeared at my table as I was finishing my beer. That was interesting. Tessa Morrison looked like she'd seen a ghost. Maybe she has. Sometimes the past has a way of catching up with people. Speaking of the past, Martin, you might be interested to know that Bradford Kane has a standing reservation here every Friday night. Table for two, always with a different young woman. Always someone he's mentoring in business. Is that so? Patricia Kane, on the other hand, hasn't been seen with her husband in public for over 6 months. Makes you wonder about the state of their marriage, doesn't it? It made me wonder about a lot of things, but mostly, it made me plan. That evening, I drove to the country club where Bradford Kane held membership, and Celeste had been spending increasing amounts of time. The Lakeside Country Club was the kind of establishment that existed to make its members feel superior to everyone else. All manicured lawns, imported marble, and staff who'd perfected the art of invisible service. I wasn't a member, but I knew someone who was. Officer Jim Benton had been my friend since high school, back when we'd both been more interested in muscle cars than career prospects. Jim had chosen law enforcement. I'd chosen restoration work. But we'd maintained our friendship through the years, bonded by shared memories and mutual respect. Martin, what brings you to the club? Finally decided to join the country club set? Just thought I'd see how the other half lives. Buy you a drink? We settled at the bar overlooking the 18th green, where the evening light painted everything in golden hues. The club was busy with the after-work crowd, men in expensive suits discussing business deals, women in tennis whites planning charity events. Jim, you ever hear anything about Bradford Kane's business practices? Kane? Sure, I know him. Big shot venture capitalist, drives a Tesla, tips well. Why? Just curious. Celeste's been working with him on some kind of startup venture. Seems like an interesting guy. Interesting's one word for it. Jim's expression grew thoughtful. We've had a few calls to his condo complex over the years. Domestic disturbances, noise complaints, that sort of thing. Nothing serious, but enough to notice a pattern. What kind of pattern? Young women coming and going at all hours. Neighbors complaining about raised voices, crying, cars peeling out of the parking lot. His wife moved out about 8 months ago, officially for health reasons. But everyone knows the real story. I absorbed this information while watching a foursome finish their round on the 18th hole. Sounds like Bradford's quite the mentor. Martin, if your wife's involved with Kane, you might want to have a conversation with her. The guy's got a reputation for promising more than he delivers, if you know what I mean. I knew exactly what he meant. But I also knew that some conversations were better conducted in public, with an audience that would remember every word. As if summoned by my thoughts, Bradford Kane himself appeared at the bar, accompanied by a woman I didn't recognize. She was young, blonde, and wearing the kind of dress that cost more than most people's monthly rent. They took seats at the far end of the bar where Bradford ordered champagne and began what appeared to be an intense business discussion. Is that one of his protégés? I asked Jim. Probably. He goes through them pretty regularly. Usually lasts about 6 months before they figure out his investment strategy doesn't include much actual investing. I watched Bradford gesture expansively while the young woman listened with rapt attention. He had the smooth confidence of a man who'd perfected his pitch through repetition, the practiced charm of someone who viewed other people as resources to be exploited. Jim, you mind if I go introduce myself? Professional courtesy and all that. Martin, what are you planning? Nothing dramatic. Just want to congratulate him on his success with young entrepreneurs. I approached their table with the casual confidence of someone who belonged in the club's refined atmosphere. Bradford looked up as I neared, his expression shifting from annoyance to polite confusion. Excuse me, Mr. Kane, I'm Martin Ashford. My wife Celeste is one of your business partners. His face went through several interesting transformations before settling on practiced charm. Martin, of course Celeste's husband. She's mentioned you. Please, join us. I don't want to interrupt your business meeting, but I wanted to thank you personally for everything you've done for Celeste. She comes home every night talking about Bradford Kane's investment philosophy, Bradford Kane's approach to mentoring, Bradford Kane's hands-on business strategies. I smiled broadly. She must have mentioned Bradford Kane's name 100 times this week alone. The young woman looked confused. Bradford's champagne glass paused halfway to his lips. Your wife is very enthusiastic about her business development, he said carefully. Oh, she's enthusiastic about a lot of things lately. Late-night strategy sessions, weekend retreats, performance bonuses. She says Bradford Kane's support means everything to her success. By now, several other patrons had turned to listen to our conversation. The country club crowd loved nothing more than a bit of drama, especially when it involved one of their own. "Well," Bradford said, standing abruptly, "we should probably— Oh, don't leave on my account. I was just telling my friend Officer Benton here about your mentoring program. He's very interested in how you select your protégés." Bradford's eyes flicked toward Jim, who had approached our table with professional interest. "Officer?" "Jim Benton, local police. Martin here was telling me about your work with young entrepreneurs. Sounds like quite an intensive program." It's very hands-on," Bradford stammered. "I'll bet it is." I raised my voice just enough to ensure the surrounding tables could hear clearly. "To Bradford Kane, who goes all in when he believes in someone." The toast echoed through the bar area, drawing amused glances and knowing smiles. Bradford's face had turned an interesting shade of red, and his young companion was beginning to look like she'd rather be anywhere else. "We really should be going," Bradford muttered, signaling for the check. "Of course. Business never sleeps, right? Give my regards to Celeste when you see her next. I'm sure she'll want to hear all about your evening." As they hurried toward the exit, I heard whispers following in their wake. The country club gossip network was even more efficient than Murphy's Bar, and by tomorrow morning, Bradford Kane's mentoring techniques would be the talk of the 19th hole. Jim returned to the bar, shaking his head. "Martin, remind me never to get on your bad side. I'm just a proud husband supporting his wife's business ventures, though I have to say, I'm starting to think her startup might need a new business model." The next morning brought a surprise. Celeste's SUV was parked in our driveway when I returned from my usual coffee run. She was waiting in the kitchen, still wearing yesterday's clothes and the kind of makeup that suggested she'd slept in it. "We need to talk," she announced without preamble. "Good morning to you too. Coffee?" "This isn't a joke, Martin. What you did last night at the country club, people are talking." I poured myself a cup and leaned against the counter, studying her face. The confident businesswoman persona had cracked, revealing something desperate underneath. "People talk about lots of things, Celeste. Weather, sports, business relationships. What specifically are they saying?" "You know exactly what they're saying. Bradford called me this morning. He's concerned about the impact on his reputation." "His reputation? What about yours?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My reputation? Martin, you've made me a laughingstock. The woman whose husband crashes business meetings to make speeches about mentoring programs. I was being supportive. You're always telling me I don't show enough interest in your work. This is different, and you know it." She moved closer, her voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Bradford is important, Martin. He has connections, influence, money. If I keep interfering, what? He'll stop investing in your startup? Stop providing performance bonuses? Stop scheduling those late-night strategy sessions?" Her hand moved toward her purse, but I was faster. The small digital recorder I'd placed there while she was upstairs had captured every word of our conversation. "You're recording me now? I'm documenting our business discussions. You never know when you might need to reference previous conversations about investment strategies." Her phone buzzed with a text message. This time I didn't need to intercept it. Her face told me everything I needed to know. "Let me guess. Tessa's got some new damage control advice?" "She says Bradford's wife is asking questions. Patricia Kane wants to know why her husband's name is suddenly being mentioned all over town in connection with young women and business partnerships." This was better than I'd hoped. "Sounds like Bradford's investment portfolio is getting some unwanted attention." "Martin, please. If this gets back to Patricia, it could ruin everything. Bradford's divorce would be messy, expensive. He might have to liquidate assets, close down his mentoring programs. That would be terrible. All those young entrepreneurs left without guidance. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out what I knew and how much damage I could do. What do you want? Want? I don't want anything, Celeste. I'm just a supportive husband who's proud of his wife's business acumen. Though I have to admit, I'm curious about the financial structure of your startup. How exactly does Bradford's investment work? It's complicated. I'm sure it is. But I've got time to learn. Maybe you could walk me through the terms of your partnership agreement. We don't have a written agreement. It's more of a handshake deal. How modern. And what exactly did you agree to provide in exchange for Bradford's support? The question hung in the air like smoke from a backfiring engine. Celeste's face went through several expressions before settling on defiance. I provide business development services, market analysis, client relations, strategic planning. At his condo? After hours? On weekends? Sometimes business requires flexibility. I'll bet it does. And the SUV, the expensive dinners, the weekend trips to his lake house, all part of the strategic planning process? Her composure finally cracked completely. You don't understand, Martin. This is my chance to be something more than just a mechanic's wife in a small town. Bradford can open doors, introduce me to people, help me build something real. Something real? I set down my coffee cup and walked to the window, looking out at the SUV that represented so much more than transportation. Celeste, do you know what's real? 23 years of marriage? The business I built with my own hands? The reputation I earned by doing honest work for honest people? That's real. Your garage? Your little car repair shop? Martin, Bradford makes more in a week than you make in a year. And yet he needs to buy companionship from married women. Makes you wonder what he's really worth, doesn't it? She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. I'm staying at Tessa's until you come to your senses. Give my regards to Bradford. Tell him I'm looking forward to our next business meeting. After she left, I spent the morning making phone calls. The first was to a private investigator I'd used occasionally for insurance fraud cases. Classic car theft was unfortunately common, and sometimes you needed professional help to track down stolen vehicles. Ray, it's Martin Ashford. I need some background research on a local businessman. Bradford Kane, venture capitalist, member of Lakeside Country Club. What kind of background? The kind that might interest his wife's divorce attorney. Financial records, business partnerships, patterns of behavior with female associates. This about your wife? This is about truth, Ray. And truth has a way of being expensive for people who've been avoiding it. The second call was to my insurance agent, the same company that had employed Lila Patterson's late husband. Small towns have long memories, and insurance companies keep excellent records. Hi, Janet. Martin Ashford. I need to add some additional coverage to my policy. GPS tracking system for the business vehicles. You know how it is. Theft prevention, route optimization, that sort of thing. Of course, Martin. We actually recommend tracking systems for all our commercial clients. Much easier to recover stolen property when you know exactly where it's been. The third call was to Derek, who answered on the first ring with his usual professionalism. Ashford Restorations, Derek speaking. Derek, how do you feel about a little surveillance work? Purely for educational purposes. Boss, I thought you'd never ask. That afternoon, we followed Celeste's SUV to Bradford Kane's office building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that screamed success to anyone within a 50-mile radius. She parked in the visitors section and disappeared into the lobby, while we waited in Derek's pickup truck with a clear view of the parking garage. Nice building, Derek observed. Must cost a fortune to lease space in there. I'm sure Bradford passes the expenses along to his investors. Question is, what kind of return are they expecting? We didn't have to wait long. Celeste emerged 2 hours later, accompanied by Bradford and another woman I recognized as Tessa. They stood near the SUV engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion, with Bradford gesturing emphatically while Celeste and Tessa listened. Looks like a strategy session, Derek said. Looks like damage control to me. Bradford handed Celeste an envelope. Thick, white, business-sized. She opened it, counted the contents, and nodded. Money changing hands in broad daylight, with witnesses. Derek, you getting this on video? Every frame, boss. Though I gotta ask, what's the endgame here? I watched my wife pocket the envelope and kiss Bradford Kane on the cheek before climbing into her luxury SUV. The endgame? Sometimes things get so broken that the only solution is complete disassembly. Strip everything down to the frame and start over. And if there's nothing worth saving, then you sell it for scrap and move on to the next project. That evening, I received a visit from an unexpected source. Patricia Kane stood on my front porch looking like a woman who'd been carrying a heavy burden for too long. She was elegant in the way that only money and breeding could provide, but there was steel underneath the silk. Mr. Ashford, I'm Patricia Kane. I believe we need to discuss our mutual problem. I invited her in, offered coffee, and listened while she laid out a story that was both familiar and heartbreaking. A husband who'd gradually become a stranger. Business trips that didn't add up. Credit card charges for restaurants, hotels, and jewelry that never made it home. Young women who called the house asking for Bradford, then hung up when Patricia answered. I've been gathering evidence for months, she said, opening a leather portfolio that contained photographs, financial records, and what appeared to be surveillance reports. My attorney says I have enough for a very favorable divorce settlement, but I wanted to speak with you first. Why? Because your wife isn't the first, Mr. Ashford, and she won't be the last unless we stop him. She showed me photographs of Bradford with a succession of young women, dinners, weekend trips, business meetings that looked more like romantic encounters. The pattern was clear. He targeted married women, usually from middle-class backgrounds, with promises of business opportunities and financial success. The SUV your wife drives? He's bought 4 identical vehicles in the past 2 years. Different women, same promise of helping them build their dreams. What happened to the others? When they stopped being useful, he moved on. Repossessed the cars, canceled the credit cards, terminated the business relationships. Most of them were too embarrassed to admit what had happened. A few tried to fight back, but Bradford has expensive lawyers and a talent for making problems disappear. I studied the photographs, seeing my wife's story reflected in the faces of other women who'd believed in Bradford Kane's promises. What do you want from me, Mrs. Kane? I want justice, Mr. Ashford, and I want to make sure no other woman falls for his lies. What did you have in mind? She smiled, and for the first time since arriving, she looked genuinely happy. I think it's time Bradford's business practices receive some public scrutiny, don't you? The Lakeside Charity Gala was the social event of the season, an annual gathering where the town's elite displayed their wealth, connections, and carefully cultivated reputations. This year's beneficiary was the Children's Hospital Foundation, a cause that allowed everyone to feel virtuous while enjoying champagne and caviar. Patricia Kane had secured my invitation through her connections on the planning committee. As Bradford's wife, she was expected to attend, smile graciously, and pretend their marriage wasn't dissolving in a very expensive legal battle. As Celeste's husband, I was expected to stay home and mind my own business. I chose a different approach. The gala was held at the country club, with the main ballroom decorated in white and gold to suggest both elegance and celestial virtue. The guest list read like a who's who of local society: politicians, business leaders, social climbers, and the kind of people who measured their worth by the size of their charitable donations. Celeste arrived with Bradford, both dressed to impress and playing their roles perfectly. She wore a midnight blue gown that I'd never seen before, accompanied by jewelry that definitely hadn't come from my mechanic's salary. Bradford sported a custom tuxedo and the confident smile of a man who believed his own publicity. They worked the room like professionals, shaking hands, exchanging business cards, and discussing investment opportunities with anyone who'd listen. Celeste had perfected the art of name-dropping, weaving Bradford's name into every conversation with the skill of a master craftsman. I watched from across the room, nursing a scotch and waiting for the perfect moment. Martin Ashford, as I live and breathe. Judith Harmon appeared at my elbow, resplendent in silver silk and dripping with diamonds. I'm surprised to see you here. This isn't usually your crowd. Evening, Judith. You look lovely. How are you enjoying the gala? It's wonderful, as always. Though I must say, I'm still processing our last dinner conversation. Celeste's business partnership has certainly generated a lot of discussion. I imagine it has. Success tends to attract attention. Success. She repeated the word like she was tasting something bitter. Is that what we're calling it? Before I could respond, the evening's master of ceremonies took the podium to begin the formal program. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the hospital's chief administrator and Tessa's aunt, welcomed the crowd and began introducing the major donors. Our next speaker represents one of our most generous corporate sponsors. Please welcome Bradford Kane of Kane Venture Capital. Bradford approached the podium with practiced confidence, adjusting the microphone and smiling at the applauding crowd. He launched into a well-rehearsed speech about community responsibility, investment in the future, and the importance of supporting those who couldn't support themselves. At Kane Venture Capital, we believe in identifying potential and nurturing it to success. Whether we're working with promising startups or supporting vital community institutions, our philosophy remains the same. We go all in when we believe in someone. The phrase sent a chill through me. Those were almost exactly the words from Celeste's accidental voicemail. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that Kane Venture Capital will be making a special donation to the Children's Hospital Foundation. But first, I'd like to share a message from one of our most successful business partners, someone who truly understands the value of dedicated mentoring. He gestured toward the sound technician, who began setting up for an audio presentation. My heart started racing as I realized what was about to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, please listen to these inspiring words about business partnership and mutual success. The ballroom fell silent as the sound system crackled to life. But instead of whatever sanitized testimonial Bradford had prepared, the speakers filled with a familiar voice. You spoil me, Bradford, but you know I appreciate everything you do for me. Celeste's face went white as her own words echoed through the ballroom. Business is about relationships, Celeste, and our relationship has been very productive. Bradford frantically gestured to the sound technician, but the man looked confused, checking his equipment as if trying to figure out what had gone wrong. If you want those late-night strategy sessions to continue, you know how to keep me motivated. After all, Bradford Kane's support means everything to my success. The crowd began to murmur, recognizing the voices and understanding the implications. I caught Patricia Kane's eye across the room. She nodded slightly and smiled. Bradford Kane's investment strategy is so much more sophisticated than anything I've seen before. Bradford Kane's approach to mentoring really sets him apart from other venture capitalists. When Bradford Kane believes in someone, he goes all in. The recording continued for the full 30 seconds. Bradford's name repeated 11 times while the ballroom audience listened in stunned silence. When it finally ended, the quiet stretched like a held breath. Bradford stood frozen at the podium, his face cycling through shock, rage, and something approaching panic. Celeste had disappeared, fled to the ladies' room or perhaps the parking lot. Technical difficulties, Bradford stammered into the microphone. That wasn't... We seemed to have some crossed wires. But the damage was done. The crowd was already buzzing with whispered conversations, cell phones appearing as people began texting and calling friends who hadn't attended the gala. By morning, the recording would be the talk of the entire town. Dr. Morrison returned to the podium, her professional composure intact despite the obvious confusion. Well, that was unexpected. Perhaps we should move on to our next presentation. I finished my scotch and headed for the exit, passing clusters of guests engaged in animated discussions about Bradford Kane's mentoring techniques and the identity of his enthusiastic business partner. In the parking lot, I found Celeste sitting in the SUV, crying into her hands while her carefully applied makeup ran in dark streams down her cheeks. "Rough night?" I asked, tapping on the passenger window. She looked up with eyes full of fury and desperation. "How could you do this to me, in front of everyone, in front of the whole town?" "Do what?" "I just attended a charity gala, beautiful event, very inspiring speeches about business partnerships." "You sabotaged the sound system. You humiliated me, humiliated Bradford, destroyed everything we've worked for." "Celeste, I'm just a mechanic. I don't know anything about sound systems. Though I have to say, that was quite an educational presentation about modern investment strategies." She started the engine, her hands shaking with rage. "This isn't over, Martin. Bradford has lawyers, connections, resources you can't even imagine. He won't let you get away with this." "Get away with what? Supporting local charity? Attending community events? Being a proud husband who wants to share his wife's business success with the world?" As she drove away, I noticed several other guests watching from the country club entrance. Among them stood Patricia Kane, elegant and composed, speaking quietly, with a man I recognized as one of the town's most prominent divorce attorneys. The next morning brought a parade of phone calls, text messages, and unexpected visitors. The charity gala recording had spread through social media like wildfire, with local news outlets picking up the story of the venture capitalist's mentoring mishap. Derek arrived at the garage with coffee and donuts, grinning like a man who'd won the lottery. "Boss, you should see the comments on the country club's Facebook page. They're talking about reviewing Bradford Kane's membership status." "Really? That seems harsh for a simple audio mix-up." "Harsh? Martin, half the town's wives are calling their husbands asking about their own business mentors. The other half are demanding to know why they don't have mentors who buy them luxury cars." Lila Patterson appeared around noon, practically vibrating with excitement. "Martin Ashford, you magnificent man. Do you have any idea what you've accomplished?" "I attended a charity function. Seemed like the civic-minded thing to do." "You've exposed the biggest scandal this town has seen since Mayor Williams got caught embezzling from the parking meter fund. Bradford Kane's reputation is finished. Patricia Kane's divorce attorney is calling it an early Christmas present. I hope Mrs. Kane finds whatever resolution she's looking for. Divorce can be so difficult when there are assets to divide." "Assets? Honey, Patricia's going to own half of everything Bradford's built. The investment firm, the real estate portfolio, the country club membership, all of its community property in a no-fault divorce state." This was better news than I'd expected. "And Celeste's startup?" "What startup?" "Turns out Bradford's been running the same scam for years. Promise young women business opportunities, provide them with expensive gifts and lifestyle upgrades, then use them for his own entertainment until he gets bored. Your wife wasn't his business partner, Martin. She was his latest acquisition." The pieces were falling into place with satisfying precision. Bradford's empire was crumbling, Celeste's illusions were shattered, and the town's gossip network was ensuring that everyone knew exactly what kind of mentoring had been taking place. But I wasn't finished yet. The confrontation I'd been expecting came 3 days after the charity gala, but not in the form I'd anticipated. Instead of Bradford Kane showing up at my garage with lawyers and threats, I received a text message from an unknown number. "Warehouse District, Building 47, 8 p.m. Come alone if you want to end this quietly." Derek read the message over my shoulder and shook his head. "Boss, this has all the makings of a really bad idea." "Probably, but some conversations need to happen away from witnesses." "You want backup?" "Not officially. But if you happen to be in the neighborhood around 8:30, I wouldn't complain." Building 47 sat at the edge of the warehouse district, like a monument to better economic times. It had been empty for 3 years, ever since the textile company that owned it moved operations overseas. The parking lot was cracked and overgrown with weeds, and half the streetlights had burned out without being replaced. Bradford Kane's Tesla was parked near the main entrance, its sleek lines looking out of place in the industrial wasteland. I pulled up beside it in my pickup truck, the contrast between our vehicles telling the whole story of our different worlds. He emerged from the shadows near the loading dock, no longer the confident venture capitalist from the country club. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled, and his face carried the haggard look of a man who hadn't slept in days. "You came," he said, as if he doubted I would. "Your message was intriguing, though I have to say the location seems a bit dramatic for a business discussion." "Business discussion?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Martin, you've destroyed everything I've built. My marriage, my reputation, my business, all of it's gone because you couldn't mind your own affairs." "My affairs? Bradford, I think you've got that backwards. Your wife came to me looking for opportunities. I provided them. That's how business works. People with resources help people with potential." "Is that what you call it? Because from where I stand, it looked more like a married man taking advantage of vulnerable women by promising them things he had no intention of delivering." He stepped closer, and I could see the desperation in his eyes. "You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Patricia's lawyers are trying to take everything. The country club's talking about revoking my membership. 3 of my biggest clients have pulled their investments. Sounds like the free market at work. Supply and demand, right? Apparently there's not much demand for your particular brand of mentoring. I can make this worth your while, Martin. Cash payment, enough to expand your little garage operation, maybe buy some new equipment. All you have to do is admit you doctored that recording, say it was some kind of joke that got out of hand." "How much?" $50,000. Cash. Tonight." I pretended to consider the offer, watching his face for tells. "That's generous. But I'm curious. Where would you get that kind of money? I heard your assets are frozen pending the divorce settlement." His expression shifted, becoming calculating. "I have resources you don't know about. Offshore accounts, private investments, assets Patricia's lawyers haven't discovered yet." "Hidden assets? Bradford, that sounds like the kind of thing divorce courts take very seriously, especially when one party is trying to conceal community property. You're recording this conversation, aren't you?" "Should I be?" Before he could answer, car doors slammed in the parking lot. Derek's pickup truck had arrived, followed by a sedan I recognized as belonging to Officer Jim Benton. Bradford's face went pale as he realized our private meeting had become significantly more public. "Insurance policy," I explained. "Derek worries about me meeting strangers in abandoned buildings. Jim worries about citizens getting involved in situations that might require police intervention. This is harassment. I could have you arrested for stalking, for interfering with my business relationships." "What business relationships? From what I hear, Kane Venture Capital is having some serious liquidity problems. Hard to maintain business relationships when your clients are questioning your investment strategies." Derek and Jim approached from the parking lot, their presence changing the entire dynamic of the confrontation. Bradford was no longer dealing with a simple mechanic he could intimidate. He was facing multiple witnesses to whatever he might say or do next. "Evening, Bradford," Jim said with professional courtesy. "Martin, Derek, everyone having a nice business meeting?" "Just discussing investment opportunities," I replied. Bradford was explaining his approach to asset management. "Asset management?" Jim's tone suggested professional interest. "That's interesting. I've been getting calls from the district attorney's office about some irregularities in local business practices, something about undisclosed financial arrangements and potential fraud allegations." Bradford's composure finally cracked completely. "This is a setup. You're all working together to destroy me." "Working together?" Derek laughed. "Bradford, we're just 3 guys from the same small town who happen to care about honest business practices. Nothing wrong with that, is there? You want to know about honest business practices?" Bradford's voice rose to near shouting. "Your wife begged me for help." She said her marriage was suffocating her, that she needed someone who understood her potential. I gave her opportunities, introduced her to important people, provided her with the lifestyle she deserved. And in exchange, she provided companionship, adult companionship between consenting adults. There's nothing illegal about that. Jim cleared his throat. Actually, Bradford, there might be some legal issues around undisclosed financial arrangements between married individuals and third parties, especially when those arrangements involve community property like vehicles, credit cards, and real estate. What are you talking about? The SUV your wife drives? I pulled out my phone and showed him a series of photographs. It's registered in your name, but she's been driving it as if she owned it. The credit cards you gave her for business expenses? They're tied to accounts that don't legally belong to her. The weekend trips to your lake house? Those could be considered gifts that should have been disclosed in your marriage. You've been spying on me. I've been documenting my wife's business activities. Amazing what you can learn when you pay attention to details. A new set of headlights appeared in the parking lot. Patricia Kane's Mercedes, followed by a car I didn't recognize. She emerged from her vehicle, accompanied by a man in an expensive suit who could only be her divorce attorney. "Bradford," she called out, her voice carrying across the empty lot. "We need to talk." The look on Bradford's face was worth the price of admission. His wife, her lawyer, a police officer, and 3 witnesses, all gathered in one place to discuss his business practices. "Patricia, I can explain." Explain what? The hidden accounts? The undisclosed assets? The pattern of financial fraud you've been running through the business? She held up a thick folder. "My forensic accountant has been very thorough, Bradford. Very thorough indeed." Her lawyer stepped forward. "Mr. Kane, I'm Robert Sterling, representing Mrs. Kane in your divorce proceedings. We need to discuss some irregularities we've discovered in your financial disclosures. This is harassment. I'm being ambushed by a conspiracy." "The only conspiracy here," I interrupted, "is the one you've been running against your wife, your clients, and every woman who trusted you to help them build something legitimate." "Martin's right," Patricia said. "I've found records of at least 6 other women over the past 3 years. The same pattern every time. Promises of business opportunities, expensive gifts, intimate relationships, then abandonment when you got bored. That's not the Lexus SUV Celeste drives? You bought 4 identical vehicles in the past 2 years. Different women, same model, same promise of helping them achieve their dreams." Bradford looked around the circle of faces surrounding him, seeing his carefully constructed world collapsing in real time. "What do you want from me?" "Justice," Patricia replied. "Full disclosure of all assets, complete financial records, and a divorce settlement that reflects the true value of our community property. And an end to your mentoring program," I added. "No more vulnerable women, no more false promises, no more using other people's dreams to fuel your entertainment. You can't stop me from conducting legitimate business." "Legitimate?" Jim stepped closer, his hand resting casually on his radio. "Bradford, I've got 3 separate complaints filed with the district attorney's office alleging fraud, embezzlement, and financial exploitation. The only reason you're not in handcuffs right now is because the victims were too embarrassed to press charges." "Until now," Patricia said. "I'm pressing charges, Bradford. All of them. Fraud, concealment of assets, breach of fiduciary duty. My attorney assures me we have enough evidence to pursue both civil and criminal remedies." The fight went out of him like air from a punctured tire. His shoulders sagged, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume that no longer fit, his confident demeanor replaced by the reality of a middle-aged man whose lies had finally caught up with him. "Martin," he said quietly, "I'll give you whatever you want. Money, a public apology, a statement clearing your wife's reputation, anything. I don't want anything from you, Bradford. I never did." "Then what was this all about?" I looked around the circle of people who'd gathered to witness the end of Bradford Kane's empire. "Patricia, finally free to pursue the justice she'd been denied. Jim, representing the law that Bradford had thought himself above. Derek, loyal friend and witness to the power of truth. Sterling, the attorney who would ensure that justice was both swift and expensive. This was about consequences, I said. You spent years treating people like disposable resources, making promises you never intended to keep, using your wealth and position to exploit women who trusted you. You thought you were untouchable because you had money and connections and the protection of social respectability. And you were wrong. Sometimes the little guy wins, Bradford. Sometimes the mechanic beats the venture capitalist. Sometimes the truth is more powerful than money. As if summoned by my words, another car appeared in the parking lot. Celeste's SUV, or rather Bradford's SUV that Celeste had been driving, pulled up to the edge of our gathering. She emerged slowly, her face showing the strain of the past few days. I got your message, she said to Bradford, not looking at me. You said you had a solution. Celeste, Patricia said gently, there is no solution, not the kind Bradford promised you anyway. My wife looked around the circle of faces, finally understanding that she'd walked into the final act of a drama that had been building for weeks. What's happening here? Justice, I said simply. The kind that comes when lies finally meet truth. Bradford told me you doctored that recording, that you were trying to destroy him out of jealousy. And what do you think now? She looked at Bradford, who couldn't meet her eyes, at Patricia, whose expression showed more pity than anger, at the lawyer with his folder full of evidence, at Jim with his badge and his radio and his professional obligation to enforce the law. I think, she said slowly, that I've been very foolish. Foolish enough to return the SUV to its rightful owner? Patricia asked. Along with the credit cards, the jewelry, and anything else my husband gave you during your business relationship? Celeste reached into her purse and pulled out a set of keys, holding them toward Patricia with a trembling hand. I never meant for any of this to happen. Bradford said he was helping me build a real business, that the personal aspects were just part of the mentoring process. They always do, Patricia said, accepting the keys. That's how men like Bradford operate. They make you believe you're special, that you're different from all the others, that what you're doing together is about business and opportunity and mutual success. But it wasn't. No, dear. It was about a bored, wealthy man using his resources to collect women like trophies. You were never his business partner. You were his latest acquisition. The truth of those words hit Celeste like a physical blow. She swayed on her feet, and for a moment I thought she might collapse. But she steadied herself, squared her shoulders, and faced the circle of people who'd witnessed her humiliation. What happens now? She asked. Now, Sterling said, consulting his folder. We proceed with the divorce settlement. Mrs. Kane will receive her fair share of the community property, including all assets Mr. Kane attempted to conceal. The district attorney will review the evidence for potential criminal charges, and you, Mrs. Ashford, will need to decide whether you want to cooperate with the investigation or risk being charged as an accessory to fraud. Accessory? Celeste's voice cracked. I didn't know. You knew enough, I said quietly. You knew Bradford was married. You knew the gifts were excessive for a legitimate business relationship. You knew the late-night meetings weren't about spreadsheets and market analysis. But you thought you'd found an easy path to the life you wanted. A rich man who'd take care of you, buy you nice things, introduce you to important people. You thought you could have it all without consequences. She looked at me with something that might have been recognition, and you couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let you destroy our marriage for a lie, Celeste. Bradford never intended to make you successful. He never planned to leave his wife for you. He never saw you as anything more than entertainment. How do you know? Patricia answered for me. Because you weren't the first, dear, and you wouldn't have been the last. The warehouse district fell silent except for the distant sound of traffic on the interstate. 6 people standing in a circle, surrounded by the ruins of Bradford Kane's empire and the wreckage of my marriage. "Bradford," Jim said finally, "I think it's time you came with me. We need to discuss some irregularities in your business practices, and the district attorney would like to ask you some questions." "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet. But I'd strongly recommend you contact your attorney and prepare to make some very detailed financial disclosures." As Jim escorted Bradford toward his patrol car, Patricia approached me with something that looked like gratitude. "Thank you, Martin. I know this wasn't easy, involving your own marriage in the investigation. Some things are more important than easy, Mrs. Kane. I hope you get the justice you deserve." "I will, and I hope you find whatever resolution you're looking for with Celeste." I looked at my wife, standing alone beside the SUV she could no longer drive, wearing jewelry she could no longer keep, facing a future she'd never planned for. "Resolution," I said. "That's an interesting word." Derek appeared at my elbow as the patrol car disappeared into the night. "So, boss, what's next?" "Next? Next we go home, Derek. We go back to fixing things that are broken and restoring things that have lost their way. And if some things can't be fixed?" I watched Celeste climb into the passenger seat of Sterling's car, accepting a ride from Patricia Kane's divorce attorney because she no longer had transportation of her own. "Then we strip them down to the frame and start over," I said, "or we sell them for scrap and move on to the next project." The warehouse district emptied slowly, each car disappearing into the night until only Derek and I remained in the cracked parking lot. The building loomed behind us like a monument to abandoned dreams, while ahead lay the road back to town and whatever came next. "Martin," Derek said as we walked toward our trucks, "remind me never to get on your bad side." "Derek, I don't have a bad side. I just have a very good memory and a strong appreciation for honest work." "And revenge?" "Revenge?" I looked back at the empty warehouse where Bradford Kane's empire had finally collapsed under the weight of its own lies. "Derek, I prefer to think of it as restoration. Sometimes you have to strip away all the false chrome and fancy paint jobs to see what's really underneath." "And what was underneath Bradford Kane?" "Nothing worth saving." As we drove back toward town, I could see the lights of home in the distance, the garage where honest work waited, the community where truth still mattered, the life I'd built with my own hands and defended with careful planning. Behind us, the warehouse district faded into darkness, taking with it the last remnants of Bradford Kane's mentoring program and my wife's dreams of easy success. Some things, once broken, could never be repaired, but sometimes that was exactly the way it should be.